Hey there, fellow readers, Rambling Collector here, and welcome back to another manga ramble on this channel. And this one here is going to be very fun, as we're going to be talking about the classic manga series of Death Note by Tsugumi Ohba and Takeshi Obata. Now y'all might be wondering why exactly I'm talking about this one as of now when it's been out for so many years now. Well, to put it simply, I was recently given the all-in-one edition by my girlfriend, and I felt after finishing it, why not talk about this classic manga? So with that being said, let's get into it, shall we? So firstly, I will say this much. With the all-in-one edition, as of right now, as a book itself, this currently stands as the largest book I have ever read at a whopping 2,400 pages in total, which could make for an exhausting yet fulfilling read. And this is definitely the edition I would recommend for hardcore collectors because I know for a fact Death Note has been reprinted so many times in various different ways, from its single volume series going up to about 12 volumes, or 13 if you count the How to Read piece. But more than that, though, you have currently the Death Note Black editions, which are like 2 volumes in one, which go up to about 6 books. And then, of course, you've got this ginormous thing of the all-in-one edition, which let me tell you right now, looking at this thing, it was intimidating, but I loved every second of it. And like I've said before, it is definitely exhausting, but it is definitely worth it if you want to save up shelf space, and if you want your entire Death Note series in one massive paperback, and if you want to brag to your friends saying, hey, I've read a 2,000-page book. There you go. But, in all honesty though, in all seriousness though, this still stands as one of the best murder mystery and thriller works in both anime and manga. And I would say a close second would be a tie between either Moriarty the Patriot or Psycho-Pass for different reasons. So Moriarty the Patriot, I would say, definitely has a Death Note vibe to it, specifically with our villainous character of Moriarty and our heroic rival of Sherlock. And that is definitely a series I want to dive into again. I did do an earlier review of it during the early years of this channel, but I might need to go back and redo that one. We'll wait and see. As for Psycho-Pass, if I could ever find this one in a manga, I most certainly would, but the anime is fantastic, as it works as a great crime, murder mystery, and thriller work, especially with the fact that it's a cyberpunk piece as well. But Death Note stands out because we all know the story. A young boy named Light Yagami finds a mysterious notebook called the Death Note, which is related to the realm of the Shinigamis, aka the gods of death. And anyone who writes a name in this notebook, that person will die. I, more often than not due to heart attacks rather than accidents. But this, of course, his string of murders, quickly attracts the attention of the famous detective known as L, and hence one of the best rivalries, aside from Sherlock and Moriarty, was born from this. And I will say this much, Light and L's rivalry was one of the best parts of this entire series. With their constant back and forth of seeing who can outplay the other, it was very entertaining to read, and it was also entertaining enough to watch as well. Like, I found myself, as I was reading this all-in-one, diving back into bits and pieces of the anime, and I'd forgotten how much I missed this series. By God, the story itself is still really good, and I know a lot of people complain about Light and how he got outplayed by Nier a lot, who's essentially like a younger carbon copy of L, which they aren't wrong, but the way I see it is that Nier himself was actually playing off of previous casework with the now deceased L. And I will say that's actually kind of smart that he's building off of past knowledge and past assumptions involving Light. Light essentially playing as L and not doing a thing about the Kira case, which is kind of obvious. I mean, he essentially reigns supreme as both L and Kira, and it makes sense. But overall, I feel like Light, in the end of the day, he got way too overcocky at this point. And it is kind of annoying that after a while, Nier just sort of figured out that Light is actually the Kira, therefore he is the main killer, and I will admit that was a little bit grating. But his thought process of going there was actually very interesting. He's essentially building off of what L would do. And I found that kind of cool because Nier and Mello both were essentially the successors of L. And I like how they were able to build off of the previous knowledge and were able to finally surpass L and defeat Kira. Very interesting. And I will admit, this kind of sparked my love for the villainous protagonist in a way, especially with Light being who he is. Like, he is a straight up psychopath maybe even sociopath, but the way he goes about it was very interesting and how he always tried to outplay his opponents. Though in some cases it felt like he was going a little bit too overcomplicated, but I think I'm ranting here. Anyways, let's move on. Next up, I want to talk about the art style here. And I'll say this much, the artist who worked on this entire series did a fantastic job. Despite the fact that Death Note is not exactly an action manga like a whole lot of Shonen Jump titles were at the time, this one still stands out as a mental battle of wills. And the artwork definitely portrays that, as they're always like in their own heads, thinking, and trying to outplay the other. And I liked how they still kept it simple though with designs, especially with Light and L. I cannot imagine though the sheer work that went into it, especially with not only drawing but also shading as well. Because you've got to nail it to where you essentially got Light's brown hair, but L's got that really dark black hair. So I cannot imagine how much ink that probably costs to be able to do that. But I like how in most cases the artwork still stays very simple, even with expressions and stuff. But I absolutely love those moments where the art style goes really three-dimensional and realistic in a sense, as you can see here on the left panel. And it just really, really shines here with that piece. And that's one of the main things that I love about Death Note is the great artwork. Despite it not being a combat-based series, it still finds a way to pull you in with gripping artwork that still stands out even today among other great artists. But now let's move on to some random thoughts here. So, another thing about Death Note is that this has a very sentimental value to me. Because first of all, my girlfriend essentially gave me the all-in-one edition, but more than that, as I've told her, and I'm telling you guys now, Death Note feels very sentimental to me because Death Note was actually the very first manga that I ever read. To put it simply, a few years back, I was still very new to the world of anime, like I did not know a great majority of series in any way, shape, or form. I was still very much a newbie to anime at the time. Like the only main things that I knew about it were a bunch of the Studio Ghibli films and like about three different series. That being Black Lagoon, Blue Exorcist, and Attack on Titan. I did not know anything about Death Note until I was lucky enough to finally read it for myself. And let me just say, having this where it's not a combat-oriented piece, where it was more of a battle of minds, a murder mystery, detective style work, it thoroughly enthralled me, and I really loved watching how Light was going to be able to outplay L, or how L would outplay Light. This entire battle of two genius minds going at each other and recognizing that, forming a friendship, yet also a deep rivalry, it was intense, and I loved it. Was I satisfied with the ending? No. Looking back on it, though, I can't really see it ending any other way, though. Light was eventually going to get caught. It's just the way that he was caught, the execution of it that feels a little bit rushed. But again, Death Note for me was the very first manga series that I had ever read, and it still holds a special place in my heart because of that. And even now, I cannot thank my girlfriend enough for giving me the all-in-one edition, which will now sit proudly on my collection, on my shelf, for years to come. And I'll still look back on it very fondly, as even though I've read a great many different manga nowadays, some possibly even better than Death Note, oh, that's arguable though, even then, Death Note will still always hold a place in my heart because of that, of it being the first manga, if that makes sense. And I want to know what your guys' thoughts were. What did you think of Death Note when it first came out, and was it the first manga for you, or what in fact was your first experience with the world of manga? I'm genuinely curious to know and would love to hear your all's thoughts on this. Not only that, though, but I think you all know what I'm going to score this one. Not even just for sentimental value, but just for how it stands as a story. And of course, I've got to give Death Note, the all-in-one edition specifically, a solid 10 out of 10. Again, great artwork. It was really great to revisit this series again, especially in this format of like a massive paperback, which again, I might have actually broken a record as reading this is like the biggest book I've ever read, at least manga-wise. I'm pretty sure there are just as big novels, maybe. I'm not entirely sure. I think the biggest one I've heard of is The Tale of Genji. But even then, I'm rambling here, guys. I apologize. But I just want to say, you guys, thank you so much for listening. If you've stuck to the end of this podcast, and I really hope you all enjoyed. And what are your thoughts on Death Note? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Is it one of your favorites? Is it not? Was it your first manga? And if not, which one was it? And once again, you guys, if you have any other great manga recommendations, please feel free to let me know in the comment section down below, or subscribe if you're interested for more of my works that I do on here. I guarantee you will not be bored. Once again, you guys, thank you so much for listening. And if you want to check out some of the other manga rambles, I will leave a link to the playlist here at the end of this video. Or if you want to see some of the other stuff I've done with novels-wise, I'll leave a link to that playlist as well. Once again, thank you all for listening. This is Rambling Collector, signing off for now, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a great day, fellow readers.